Welcome. This is Tigray Mass Media Agency. I am Lalam Techano with today's news. Now I'll proceed to the details. The genocidal war waged on Tigray has been marked with horrifying atrocities. One among the atrocities was the massacre in Wuqro committed by Eritrean soldiers on November 27, 2020, that resulted in the killing of hundreds of civilians. Families and friends of victims held a memorial service this past weekend to commemorate the many victims of the atrocious crimes. Our reporters were on the ground to observe the memorial services, and Haile Gebru has the details for us.
Wuqro is a small town located in the eastern zone of Tigray, just over 40 kilometers from the capital. Wuqro is known as the center of conference tourism in Tigray. But just over a year ago, this friendly and fast-emerging town would see one of its most tragic days. On November 27, 2020, Eritrean troops would brutally murder over 100 civilians, including children and the elderly. Haile Dada and Jonathan Nagatu are survivors of the Wuqro massacre, describe the horrors of the day.
They killed
Kivrom, Amanil and Tsagawi here. They were hit by shrapnel. Their bodies were not even in one piece. It was dispersed in every direction. We were also victims of the atrocities. Our legs were amputated, but thanks to God, we are still alive. We've lived through terrible times. It was such a horrific time for all of us. How dare they kill children, adults, and mothers just because they were standing near the main road, public recreation centers, or at home? We thought that soldiers fought against soldiers, not civilians.
Last week, a memorial ceremony was held in Wuqro to commemorate the victims of the massacre. Michael Abraha, a former official of the Eastern Zone, addressed residents of Wuqro and families of the victims.
We shouldn't be crying as we remember those killed by invading forces. We must never kneel before them, not even for a minute. We shouldn't mourn. The fact is that the civilians have been massacred by the barbaric Eritrean forces. They are our martyrs now. Our enemies have done all they could to us. Tigray and Tigrayans are cut off from the rest of the world due to the siege imposed upon us. A real situation is solidarity. We call upon international communities to bring these criminals to justice for all the atrocities committed in Tigray in the past year.
On December 3, 2021, during the memorial ceremony held in Wuqro, the Interreligious Council of the town addressed its message calling on the international community to bring perpetrators to justice. The council, in its statement, expressed that the invading forces killed hundreds of civilians, including people with disability, civilian residents, not to mention the women who were brutally raped.
By inviting Eritrean troops and the Amhara Special Forces. So, in this town, 111 civilians had been killed and 46 civilians also injured, unjustly by the Eritrean and Amhara Special Forces. Females had been raped by mass of soldiers. The soldiers used raping as a weapon of war. Those females being victims of both physical and psychological injury. Individual residences and religious institutions had been bombarded by heavy bombardments through the external enemies. Because of that, many homesteads had been collapsed and injured. Individuals dead, individuals also injured. In case of invasion, the and the medical instruments had been invaded by the forces, factories, banks, and social services also. Ethiopian government used a blockage of trucks of aid supplied by the internal donors to destroy the whole people of Tigray through man-made starvation.
Interreligious Council of Wuqro also added that, due to the blockade in Tigray, children and people with chronic illnesses are dying due to lack of food and medical supplies. Moreover, since the end of June, Tigrayans have been under a complete communication blackout. Discontinuation of electricity and banking services as the Ethiopian government continues to use food as a weapon of war. The council has also condemned the ethnic profiling and mass detention of Tigrayans across Ethiopia, and asked that religious leaders in Ethiopia play their part in ending the conflict and call for lasting peace.
Ethiopian government declared a massive detention for the people of Tigray living in different regions and towns of Ethiopia based on their identity. Towns attacked, institutions damaged, and civilians had been killed and injured by drones and military jet strikes. Ethiopian religious institution fathers should revise your decision, because your decision had made injure the religious institutions, churches and mosques had been bombarded and collapsed. Civilians also dead and injured. You have to be called, especially religious fathers of Orthodox to the church. You have to be called by Jesus Christ to preach kingdom of God for the poor. The same is true. Religious fathers of Muslim, you have to be called by Prophet Muhammad to preach peace. But you are stand on the side of Abiy Ahmed. You decide, on your decide, many churches and mosques have been collapsed. If not, you are not representatives of church institution of Tigray.
The Interreligious Council also stated the need to put pressure on the Ethiopian government to end the siege on Tigray that has put the lives of millions at risk.
We want to address international communities. We need to stop blockage of universal donors. We need to stop mass detention of civilians based on their identity. We need to stop airstrikes of towns and civilians. This is what is happening in Tigray, what is happening in Wukro town. On the will of God, we will win. Peace and providence of God be with us.
The Ethiopian government has been carrying out a series of airstrikes in Tigray since October 2021. As a continuation, Abiy Ahmed's regime has conducted yet further fresh airstrikes in Maqala. The airstrikes were conducted on December 5th, 2021 around 3 p.m. and landed in a family's residence in private-owned businesses with no military installations in the area. Civilian properties were destroyed because of the airstrike. For more, Faniel Amuru reports.
Since the start of the conflict in Tigray, the central government has been conducting numerous airstrikes in different parts of Tigray, killing and injuring dozens of innocent civilians and destroying civilian properties. Since 18th October, Abiy Ahmed's government intensified the airstrikes targeting residential areas in the capital and other parts of Tigray. Sunday, December 5, 2021, the Ethiopian Air Force bombed the residential area multiple times in the capital Maqala. These aerial strikes were conducted around 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I was around here during the airstrike. I was having coffee over there. The drone came and bombarded the house.
I was here when the drone started bombarding the area. The drone bombarded my grocery bar right after I got out of here. I was very shocked. There were children inside the house. Luckily they got out of it right before the strike. I'm a civilian and this is my house. I've worked so hard to build it, but now the drone has destroyed it.
The aerial strikes were conducted in a place with no military activity or whatsoever that could be militarily targeted. It is purely a residential area. This shows that the government of Abiy Ahmed is deliberately targeting civilians and civilian properties.
As you can see, the bombarded place is a residential area. Neither a politician nor a person with any political connection lives around here. This is a civilian property. This is just a perpetuation of the genocidal war waged against the people of Tigray. There is no government official that could probably be targeted around this neighborhood. Only civilians live around here.
I'm a civilian. I'm not involved in any political movement. I work here. This is my business. This grocery bar was the only means of income that I had, but now the drone has destroyed it. I don't have any means of income to depend on. It will be hard to maintain my life from now on.
The attack on Sunday, December 5, was conducted for the third time within the last week. The one that was carried out on Tuesday has attacked the Takaza hydroelectric dam, causing a grave damage to the largest power supply infrastructure in Tigray. Consequently, Tigray is now under a total blackout ever since.
The president of Tigray, Debretsion Gebremichael, has released a statement on Sunday, December 5th, and briefed the recent developments regarding the rearrangements made to the deployment of the Tigray army. According to the president, the ongoing rearrangements being made to the deployment of the Tigray army in areas it covered so far are taking place following to evaluations and research done within the army, not due to external forces or factors. Debretsion said the very aim of the advances of the Tigray army forces has never been to occupy places in the neighboring regions of Amhara and Afar. He further said the very aim of the fighting is to break the months-long siege and destroy the brutal army of Abiy Ahmed and its allies who have committed genocide against the people of Tigray. President Debretsion said Abiy's government is intensifying its genocidal project against the people of Tigray through the siege, mass arrests, and a series of airstrikes. So we need to do the current rearrangements to break the siege for once and for all and relieve the people of Tigray from its sufferings. President Debretsion pledged that the rearrangements will facilitate the defeat of the enemy forces or put them to the negotiating table. President Debretsion also accused that the involvement of foreign forces in the war is increasing. It's to be recalled that the president has wrote a letter to Antonio Guterres of the UN to engage Iran, Turkey, and the UAE, who have been arming the genocidal regime, which has been bombarding civilians and civilian infrastructures. The Ethiopian troops, together with their allies from neighboring Eritrea and the Amhara region, have been committing massive atrocities, including massacres, gang rape, and destruction and looting of public as well as private properties in Tigray during their 8 months occupation of the area. DBL Industrial Park, found at Quiha subsidy in Mekelle, the capital of Tigray, is one of the many private industries that faced the fate of destruction and lootings. An initial damage assessment revealed that the industrial park have encountered an estimated loss of over $12 million. $12 million. Abraha Gebremichael has the details for us.
DBL garment factory based in Mekelle had created job opportunities for thousands of the city's residents in the last decade until the factory was looted and vandalized by Ethiopian forces last year. According to Lebelo Gebreselassie, CEO at DBL Garment Factory, the factory has ceased operation entirely after losing almost all of its plants and equipments, worth more than $12 million.
Out of 1,150 sewing machines, 35 of them have been looted, and 330 of them have become out of use as their spares have been taken by the invaders. All of our accessories and fabrics have been looted. The enemy broke into our store and looted more than 88 tons of fabric that had been stored there. Our company has sustained a lot of damage. Our preliminary findings indicate that our company has sustained loss of more than $12 million, which equals to more than $500 million.
DBL Garment Factory had created job opportunities for thousands of Mekelle city residents, whose households had primarily depended on their income. Tsahai Gebrehewot and Dosu Tesfai were one of many employees at DBL and supported their families from their income they earned from the company, but now find themselves jobless and in a dire economic situation.
I was employed in 2016. I had worked here for 3 years. I used to earn 4,000 birr a month. I have 4 children. I had been supporting my children using this income. But now, the company has been destroyed and we've become jobless due to the action of Abiy Ahmed and Eritrean troops. We have not had a salary for a year now. My children and I are now in a desperate situation as we are unable to feed ourselves.
We had a good life working here. The salary we used to earn had enabled us to feed ourselves, invest in our education and development. But we have not been paid for a full year now. Many employees of the company, including myself, are in a dire economic situation now.
DBL garment factory is just one of many industrial entities ravaged by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces in the past year of conflict. Factories have been looted, their equipments destroyed, while some had even been targets of aerial bombardments.
U.S. Embassy in Asmara says Eritrean Embassy's recent press release regarding the possibility of humanitarian corridor through Eritrea as inaccurate. The Eritrean Embassy in the United States had released a statement late last week on its social media account stating its willingness to facilitate a humanitarian corridor through Eritrea, although there had not yet been any request to do so. U.S. Embassy in Asmara emphasized that Eritrean forces have hindered access to humanitarian assistance, and they also have committed serious and widespread human rights abuses, including sexual violence and extrajudicial killings. The U.S. also called on Eritrean forces to immediately withdraw its forces from Ethiopia, saying Eritrea's continued misguided military involvement is destabilizing the region, exacerbating an already dire humanitarian situation, and hindering efforts to achieve a negotiated solution to the year-long conflict. In the 8 months long that the Ethiopian and Eritrean soldiers were in Tigray, they have committed all kinds of atrocities ranging from robbery to rape and mass killings. Azbi is one of the areas in Tigray that has witnessed a horrific massacre of more than 52 civilians. For more, Solomon Takhlai reports.
The 8 months long occupation of Tigray by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces was characterized by the looting and destruction of public as well as private property, rape and mass killing of innocent civilians. The fate of Azbi, a district some 50 kilometers from Mekelle, is no different. According to an assessment conducted in Azbi, more than 50 innocent people have lost their lives due to the actions of invading forces. Hirut Gabraslasey, a resident of the area, says she had lost one child and one grandchild in a single day.
I lost my son and my grandson who was finally feeling better after having been sick for a long time. He was only 16. I had to go through a lot to get him treated, but they took him away from me. They took him while he was getting water from a public tap, and they killed him. I couldn't find my children's body. We begged and begged, but they wouldn't give us the bodies. By the time we found them, it was just their clothes that was left.
Families of victims explained how they had not been sure of the whereabouts of their loved ones for almost 40 days after they had been killed, and their bodies were eaten by vultures.
They killed them brutally. We had no idea how they were killed. When families of victims went to ask them about their children, they would send them away. I once went to ask about my children, but they told me to go away. I was worried because I couldn't find my children. I went through a lot to get him treated, but they took my child away from me. I still don't know how my child was killed. People told us that they saw them go this way or that way, and I went everywhere to look for them. At some point, we heard that they were killed, but their bodies were nowhere to be found. We couldn't tell if it was them. They finally used their clothes to identify them.
40 days after the killing took place, we collected what was left of their bodies and buried them in St. Michael Church.
Mahali Barhu is among those who were destined to be murdered, but was lucky enough to have survived. He remembers that day in excruciating detail.
They came to my house and took me. They put thorns all over my body. They stabbed me with a knife in a different parts of my body. They took me to this part of the road and left me in my underwear.
A local official in Azbi, Mulumara, says that based on the assessment, around 52 people were killed. Furthermore, he adds, several women were raped and many infrastructures destroyed.
Around 52 innocent civilians were killed in this district alone, and the killers prohibited burial of those they murdered. Women were also raped, and this has caused psychological damage to the victims.
Children have been dying and are being diagnosed with different chronic illnesses due to the terribly worsening famine every day. Health specialists explain that this does not only affect children but the society as a whole. For more, Bethlehem Ayala has the details.
People in Tigray have been suffering from the ongoing famine, and children are the ones being affected the most, as many hospitals have been reporting children's disheartening days. Dr. Hailemariam and Dr. Zerai are health specialists, explaining how famine could affect a child's mental and physical growth, and how it can affect the society in general.
If mothers didn't get balanced diet during pregnancy, or if babies were not properly fed during the first year after birth, their growth, especially their mental growth, could be affected badly. Baby's brain function is only 36% of adult's brain function. The growth doubles in the first year, and in the next 2 to 3 years, their brain function almost gets completed. But if the babies were somehow facing any lack of food during this time, their mental growth can be affected negatively. There are different signs they show when they are affected mentally or physically, but mostly they get swells all over their body.
The doctor stated that lack of balanced diet and proper medication could affect the baby's fertility by the time they become adults, and they could also be affected with chronic illnesses, and worse, may lead to their deaths.
They could be affected with chronic illnesses, infertility, and it could be also lead to their deaths. Infertility is one of the side effects, which means that they will not be able to produce, and this will not only affect the children, eventually it will also affect the society in general.
Hate speech is known to be a key feature of genocide, playing an instrumental role in justifying and normalizing the killing and suffering of a particular group considered a minority. Apparently, hate speech has been used as an instrument in the genocidal campaign waged against Tigrayans. Winta Kidana has more.
Since November 4th, when Ethiopian forces started their aggression on Tigray as part of their genocidal campaign, hate speech has been used as an instrument by order of higher government officials as well as individuals calling for the killing and arrest of Tigrayans. The hate speech continues to attack Tigrayans for a reason yet unknown, except only because they are Tigrayans.
ያለ ምንም አማራዊ ኢትዮጵያዊ ደግነት ከነሱ ጋር ሲመጣ ያለ ምንም ወላወል በሚያስፈልገው ማንኛው እውነቴን ነው የምናገረው አረመናዊ በሆነ ጭካኔ ነው ልንጋፈጣቸው የሚገባው አረመናዊ በሆነ ጭካኔ
This is Andargachev Tsige, who was once named as the Trojan horse of the Eritrean government to destabilize Ethiopia by former Prime Minister of Ethiopia Hailemariam. Moreover, he is a Secretary General of Gumbet Sabat, labeled by the Ethiopian Parliament as a terrorist group. On the 22nd of December 2009, an Ethiopian court sentenced Tsige to days in absentia. On 23rd of June 2014, he was imprisoned by the Ethiopian government and arrested by Yemeni security forces in collaboration with Ethiopian intelligence service members at Yemen's San'as International Airport while in transit from the United Arab Emirates to Eritrea. In October 2017, it was reported that both the president of the Law Society and the chair of the Bar Council had urged the United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary to work on securing Tsige's release. He made the statement above in a crowd of trained combatants stating that they should use the most savage of cruelties. The antagonism increases sharply as the Tigrayan Defense Force continues to make gains, leaving Abiy's government and officials desperate. Kasai Chamedai, former colonel of the Derg regime, who has always portrayed a hateful image towards Tigrayans, compares Tigrayans to demons and requested the trained combatants to take the war as a holy war.
ክርስቲያን የሆናችሁ በስመ አብ ወልድ ብላችሁ ተኩሱ እስላም የሆናችሁ ብስሚላህ ብላችሁ ተኩሱ እነዚህ አጋንንቶች ፊታችሁ አይቆሙም አረጋግጥላችኋለሁ
He continued his rhetorical speech by influencing the superiority of the Amharan ethnic.
ሽማግሌን እርሻውን በሚያርስበት ጊዜ ምንም ሳይበደሉ አዝምተው እዚህ ድረስ መጥተዋል ግን እኮ አላወቁንም እኛ እኮ የቴዎድሮስ የሚኒሊክ ልጆች ነን
The spread of hate speech of government personnel to uplift combatants into fighting is without limit. A former military member of the Derg regime, Naaman Zaleka, misled the soldiers as if the whole government was filled with Tigrayans.
እንደገና ዳግም ኢትዮጵያ ህዝብ በጥቂት ትግሬዎች የበላይነት እንዲገዛ ከዛም አልፎ ቤታችን እንዲፈርስ እንድንዋረድ ባሪያ እንድንሆን እንፈቅዳለን? ስለዚህ ምንድን ነው የሚያስፈልገው? ወኔ፣ ጽናት፣ ቁርጠኝነት፣ ድርጅት። ከዛ በኋላ ይሄን አውሬ መንጋ መደምሰስ ነው።
According to data from the Global Society of Tigray scholars and professionals, over 32,000 Tigrayans have been arbitrarily and indefinitely detained by Ethiopian forces. Ethnic profiling and abuse against Tigrayans has shown a sharp increase since the declaration of the nationwide